In this video, I'll be giving you the top 10 hardest goals that will keep you busy forever in Pokemon GO. There are several activities in Pokemon GO that can keep you coming back to the game every day, whether it be collecting shinies, completing your Pokedex, the Go Battle League, or raiding legendaries. Niantic has provided no shortage of stuff to do. However, there are a few insane milestones that very few players will ever achieve. Some of the most hardcore Pokemon GO players will have some of the most hardcore goals, after all. To the average player, achieving any of these goals will be next to impossible. Thus, if you are looking to challenge yourself in some incredible ways, consider taking on any of the goals listed in this video. Some of these will keep you active for a few months, while others will take you several years with some insane luck. Right, so let's get into it. The first extremely difficult goal I wanted to talk about is to achieve Legend rank in the Go Battle League. Now for battlers of Pokemon GO, this is not an insane goal. Rather, some would consider it fairly easy, saying it simply just requires consistency and dedication to achieve. However, it's actually quite complicated and expensive. In order to realistically have a chance at hitting Legend rank, you will likely have to spend millions of Stardust and candy on a couple dozen top tier meta Pokemon. You will also need quite a large amount of Stardust on hand in order to power up new meta Pokemon that get released. Since the introduction of a new Pokemon or move could drastically shake up the Go Battle League meta, you will always need to be prepared in order to keep up. You will also need some incredible luck. Not only do you need to come across very specific IVs for certain Pokemon, but your luck could determine your matchups in battle. Since the Go Battle League is a glorified game of rock, paper, and scissors, you may come across several games where you end up with an unfavorable lead. This could most certainly hinder you from achieving your necessary wins. Speaking of which, getting higher ranks in the Go Battle League is an incredible grind. The final push to Legend requires you to win several battles in a row, as you do not gain a whole lot of ranking points. But for every losing set, you may end up losing even more points than you gain from winning sets. You will most definitely need to grind out your Go Battle League battles as much as you can throughout the season, and you need to get the best Pokemon possible if you want to hit Legend. Next, let's move on to some goals that require some extreme dedication. The next difficult goal that I wanted to talk about is to have 100 million Stardust. This goal is pretty straightforward. Accumulate as much Stardust as you can until you have about 100 million on hand. Now, if you seldom spend your Stardust, you could probably achieve this milestone over time, but in all likelihood, you will likely have a very difficult time purposefully getting this much Stardust by casually playing the game. If you get an average of about 500,000 Stardust per week, it will take you several years to get this amount of Stardust, assuming you do absolutely zero Stardust spending. However, if you want to be an effective raider or battle in the Go Battle League, you will be required to spend a huge amount of Stardust. Thus, unless you have pretty much every Pokemon that you need maxed out, you will likely be spending Stardust throughout your play. Therefore, it will be extremely difficult to get an amount of 100 million Stardust at any given point. As of right now, there are a handful of players who have achieved this milestone, including Fleece King, who many consider to be the top Pokemon GO player in the world. If you want to be the next person to achieve this milestone, then you better start saving that Stardust. Now, the next super hard goal that I wanted to talk about is one that I call the maxed Hundo teams. This goal is pretty simple. Look up the absolute best raid attacker of each type and collect 6 perfect IV Pokemon of each of these and max them out. Now, if you take into consideration that some of the top raid attackers for certain types are Shadow Pokemon, Legendary Pokemon, or outright super rare Pokemon, this is probably one of the most difficult achievements you can do. Getting the XL Candy and Stardust to max out just one of these would be really hard in and of itself, but doing it for 6 copies of 18 different Pokemon would be insane. You also have to take into consideration that not all top tier Pokemon are future-proof. There is a high chance that a different Pokemon will come out that will out DPS the current top Pokemon of that type. Thus, you will run the risk of spending all of that Stardust and candy only for those Pokemon to fall off later on. Regardless, I think this would be a very impressive feat, one which I don't think even Brendan Tan could achieve. And if you ever happen to achieve it, you would be pretty much set for life with this game. Alright, now the next difficult goal is one that is probably the most feasible, but extremely luck-based, and that is to have a robust collection of Shundos. Shundos, or shinies with perfect IVs, are the quintessential collector's item in Pokemon Go. Getting one of these highly coveted Pokemon is extremely difficult. You will need to be insanely lucky in raids, or you will need to consistently get lucky trades with your friends. Overall, it will take a lifetime in order for a typical player to get even one. Now, some players are certainly luckier than others, but there are also players who create their own luck. They raid a crazy amount, and they interact with their friends as much as possible. These are the players that will likely get more Shundos than others. So, having a goal of several Shundos in your collection would be an insane goal to have. But if you want to be the best collector in your community, then collecting Shundos should be what you set your sights on. Next, let's move on to another extremely difficult goal, and that is to complete every single platinum medal. Recently, I uploaded a video going over the top 10 hardest platinum medals in Pokemon Go. Now, if you watched that video, you would know that there are several platinum medals that require an insane amount of time and work in order to get. Well, that is why this particular goal is on this list. Getting every single platinum medal would require years of dedicated grinding, and very few players will likely ever obtain all of them. Certain medals would be fairly easy, while others could take you years of tedious gameplay. Overall, this is probably one of the most labor-intensive goals on this list, but it is probably the most doable out of all of them. As long as you are playing the game, you are contributing to almost all of the platinum medals. Thus, continuously playing Pokemon Go will allow you to eventually achieve this massive feat. It could probably take you several years though. Now, the next goal I wanted to include on this list is to complete a living Shinydex. Getting a living Shinydex means you have at least one of every single shiny Pokemon that has ever been released in your Pokemon storage. This includes every stage of each Pokemon's evolution, and also super rare shinies you could only get through incredible means. I would honestly say this is actually doable, but considering that a vast majority of the several hundred shiny Pokemon that are currently obtainable are full odds, you will need some insane luck and dedication to complete this achievement. There are quite a few players out there who are actively grinding this out, and some are pretty close to obtaining it. But as Niantic continues to release shiny Pokemon, this task gets increasingly more difficult over time. Hopefully, those players who are looking to have a complete living shiny Pokedex are able to keep up, but that will require some insane luck and intense grinding every time Niantic releases a new one. Okay, so the first half of this video went over difficult player goals that could be achieved by pretty much any player. It just requires a whole lot of dedication and work, but eventually they can be done. Now, the next goals that I wanted to talk about for the rest of this video are what I would consider as near impossible goals. These are goals that maybe only 1 or 2 players in the world will be able to achieve in their lifetime, if it is even possible. The first of these near impossible goals is to complete a living Hondodex. Much like the last goal that I talked about, this particular goal requires you to have a 100% perfect IV of every single Pokemon currently released in Pokemon Go in your Pokemon storage. Since this requires you to get perfect 4-star Pokemon of every single species, that means you will need to get a perfect IV of every single legendary and wild spawn, as well as with mythicals from special research. The latter is probably what makes this feat near impossible. Since you can only get 1 or maybe 2 of each special research mythical, the chances of you getting a perfect IV of every single one of these are slim to none. You will probably have a higher chance at winning the lottery than getting a 100% IV of every single one of these mythicals. Now, if you exclude these specific Pokemon, then maybe it will be possible to have a living Hondodex. But considering how many legendaries and wild spawns are currently in the game, it is highly unlikely. However, if you want to keep yourself active in Pokemon Go with a very difficult goal, then this one might be the one you can pursue. But good luck on that one. Okay, next let's talk about a goal that will be extremely difficult and probably impossible for both casual players and hardcore players alike, and it sort of coincides with the previous two. The 8th super hard goal on this list is going to be completing all of the various Pokedexes in Pokemon Go. Now, I'm not just talking about the regular basic Pokedex, where all you have to do is catch at least one of every single species, but I'm also talking about the Shiny Pokedex, the Lucky Pokedex, Mega Evolution Pokedex, Purified Pokedex, Shadow Pokedex, Perfect IV Pokedex, and 3-Star Pokedex. Considering that there are over 700 species of Pokemon in Pokemon Go, getting every single one of these Pokedexes completed would be a near impossible task. Sure, some of them will be smaller than others, but you still need to grind it out hardcore and not miss out on any particular event. Certain ones are also time-gated, like the Shadow Pokedex. Some Shadow Pokemon were only available for a limited time, like Shadow Legendaries. They are likely not going to make a reappearance in Pokemon Go, at least for the foreseeable future. So if you missed out on any of these, or you purposely skipped them in order to save your Super Rocket Radars for a future Shadow Legendary, then you will not be able to complete the Shadow Pokedex. Of course, the other Pokedex that coincides with this is the Purified Pokedex. This one might be less complete than the Shadow Pokedex for most players, as it is typically not ideal to purify Shadow Pokemon. Also, probably the one Pokedex that will be impossible to complete at this point will of course be the Perfect IV Pokedex. Like I mentioned before, you can only get 1 or 2 of each special research mythical, which means there is an extremely high likelihood that you will never complete your Perfect IV Pokedex. But for each of the other ones aside from these 3, it may be possible to complete them over time if you played the game ridiculously hardcore. Alright, so even though I would consider this next goal to be nearly impossible, I actually think there are players out there who have actually achieved it. The 9th super difficult goal in this video is to catch 1 million Pokemon. Let's do a little math. Assuming that you hit the weekly catch limit of 14,000 Pokemon every single week, getting 1 million catches will take you roughly 72 weeks, or about 1.5 years. Now, this may not seem like much of a big deal, especially for a feat that is considered near impossible. However, reaching the weekly catch limit even once will require you to catch nearly 2,000 Pokemon per day, and chances are you will likely not even see that many in one day unless there are boosted spawns. This also means you will need that many Pokeballs per day as well, which is a ton of Pokestops you will need to spin daily. Now, like I said, this achievement has been done by 1 or 2 players out there, thus, I guess you can't say it is impossible, but for the average player, this sort of goal will likely be out of reach, unless they continue to play the game for several decades. Alright, finally, we reached the last goal on this list, and it is going to be getting 1,000 gold gym badges. This is going to be an absolute monster of an achievement. Getting just 1 gym badge to gold is a monumental feat, and very rarely do you have more than a dozen completed at a time. Now imagine getting 1,000 different gyms to gold. This will only be possible depending on how populated your local area is with gyms, but even if you live in a heavily populated urban city, you will likely have no more than 100 total gyms in a 10-mile radius. On top of that, the turnaround rate of these areas are typically really high, thus making it difficult to hold down a gym for a long period of time. Getting 1,000 gyms to gold will require you to travel a frequent amount. You will need to get gold in gyms within several areas in order to hit 1,000, and you will need to manage them as best as you can. If you are consistent and dedicated with your gym battles, there is a chance you could complete this goal someday. But regardless, it is a good goal to have to motivate you to constantly attack and defend gyms, because the more gold gyms you have in various towns that you visit, the more items you will get every time you visit them. Alright, so with that, this is the end of this video. Let me know your thoughts on these goals down below in the comments. What massively insane goal are you currently taking on? Are you one of the few players that has achieved any of these goals? Let me know down below and let's have a great discussion. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if it's your first time here to my channel. And don't forget that little bell so you stay up to date on whenever I upload videos. And I want to give a shout out to my patrons on Patreon. You make this channel content possible. If you want to support my channel in any way, then do consider checking out the links in the description below. And yeah, that's going to be it. I'm Jinsula. Be safe, have fun, love yourself, and I'll catch you all later.